My name is Harold Bennett, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived in my little brick house on the east side of Raleigh for nearly 4 decades. I worked the assembly line at a manufacturing plant long enough to know the sound of every machine by heart. I raised my boy, Marcus, on the same street where I learned to ride a bike, and I always believed he'd be the one person who'd never turn his back on me. But a few weeks ago, he sat across from me at my own kitchen table and suggested, real gentle, that I consider moving into a nursing home. He said it like he was offering me comfort, like he was doing me a favor. But something in his eyes felt off, practiced, almost. It wasn't until I found the forged papers, my signature copied at the bottom of a document transferring my house and accounts into his management, that my heart dropped straight through the floor. This wasn't concern. This was a takeover. And what he didn't know was that I still had a few quiet strengths left in me, and one of them was a friend with powerful connections who owed me a favor. My name is Harold Bennett, and at 65 years old, I've grown used to the kind of quiet that settles into a man's bones after a lifetime of working with his hands. My mornings start slow now. Coffee in the same chip mug I bought back in '89. The front porch creaking beneath me as I sit and watch the sun climb over the pines across my street. My neighborhood isn't fancy, never has been, but it's steady, familiar. You can tell the time of day by how the birds move across the wires, how the breeze comes up from the creek out back. I've lived in this little brick house for 38 years. Every dent in the doorway, every loose floorboard in the hall, every scratch in the kitchen counter is a history my hands remember. My wife, bless her soul, used to call it Harold's Museum of Accidental Art. She passed 10 years ago, and since then, the house has been my anchor. It breathes when I breathe. It settles when I settle. And up until a few months ago, my son Marcus seemed to love it too. He grew up in these rooms, learned to walk on this old hardwood, built blanket forts in the living room with his friends, leaving pillows everywhere. He used to tell me the house had a heartbeat, but as he got older, something changed, not all at once, just in small ways you don't notice until you suddenly do. The change started slow, like a creaky hinge you ignore until the door won't open right. He began visiting more often, which at first I welcomed. A man my age doesn't take family for granted. Marcus would stop by on Saturday mornings with pastries from the bakery on 5th Street. He always brought two, one for him, one for me, even though he never stayed long enough to finish his. I'd ask him to sit, take a load off, tell me how work was treating him. He'd smile that quick, polite smile and say he had somewhere he needed to be, but he wanted to check on me. Check on me. Those words never bothered me then, but they started to feel heavier later. One Saturday, he came with a handful of brochures tucked under his arm. Bright pictures of smiling seniors sitting in spotless lounges. Retirement communities, they called themselves. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. "Son," I said, holding the glossy paper up to the light, "you trying to get rid of me?" He laughed, but there was something in that laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No, Dad, nothing like that. Just something to consider. These places have great support. Nurses, activities. You wouldn't have to worry about things around the house anymore." I looked around my living room. My wife's framed embroidery still hanging above the mantel, the old clock that chimed late every hour, the sun coming to the blinds like it always had. "I'm not worried," I said. "Yeah," he replied gently, "but maybe you should be." I brushed off the comment. Kids worry. Kids overreact. I left it alone. The next week, he brought another set of brochures. This time the pictures were fancier. Pools, fitness rooms, smiling staff members in pressed uniforms. It felt like visiting hours in a brochure factory. I set them aside, but something in the pit of my stomach tightened. He'd sit on the couch talking about mobility concerns and future planning, while his eyes drifted over my cane leaning against the wall. I only use that cane when my knees stiffen up on cold mornings, but the way he looked at it, you'd think I needed it to breathe. Dad, you shouldn't be climbing those attic stairs alone. Dad, that back porch step is too high. Dad, you nearly slipped last month when it rained. He wasn't wrong. I had slipped, and I had needed to sit down afterward. But the way he mentioned it every time he visited made me feel like I was auditioning for a role as an invalid. I tried to stay patient because that's what parents do. You let your kids say their piece, even if it stings a bit. But then his visit started feeling planned. Like he wasn't just stopping by, he was checking boxes. He'd look around the house with a kind of assessment in his eyes. Not admiration, not nostalgia. Assessment, like he was keeping track of what worked and what didn't. One afternoon in early spring, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard something behind me. Marcus stood at the counter holding my medication bottle, turning it over in his hand. He didn't say a word, just snapped a photo of the label. A cold little pinch grabbed my chest. "What are you doing?" I asked, drying my hands on a towel. He didn't look up, just checking dosage information. "For what?" "For, records." "Records?" I echoed, a slow heat rising in my neck. He nodded like it was nothing, just being responsible. Responsible. That word felt like a slap, lightly wrapped in a compliment. I didn't say anything else, but something shifted that day. A tiny crack in the foundation of trust one always thought was unshakable. Not giant, not loud, just a hairline fracture you can feel with your fingertips if you press the right way. Later that week, Marcus hovered again while I walked from the living room to the kitchen, watching how I held the railing, watching how my knee stiffened. He made a small noise with his tongue, half concern, half something else. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." "You sure? You seem off your balance today." I chuckled even though something inside me tightened. "Son, I've been walking on this earth for 65 years. If I was off balance, I'd tell you." He didn't smile. He just gave that soft, almost patronizing nod. The one people give toddlers try and tie their shoes. That nod stayed with me all night. Soft, reflective moment. Later, I sat on my porch as the daylight faded. The cicadas buzzed, and the heat clung to the boards under my feet. I watched the sky turn peach then purple. My wife used to say sunsets were God's way of reminding us we got through another day. I rubbed the worn with the porch railing, feeling the grooves. This house had carried my little family through storms and birthdays and hard seasons. It held every version of me. I wasn't ready to let it go. That thought was still in my chest the next morning when I went and checked the mail. It was a bright morning, warm light, birds bickering in the oak tree, neighbors waving as they walked their dogs. I opened the mailbox expecting the usual bills, coupons, maybe a newsletter from the old Union. Instead, there was a single envelope addressed not to me, but to my son, Marcus Bennett, care of Harold Bennett, my address underneath. I stared at it for a long moment. That alone wasn't strange. Kids use their parents' addresses sometimes. But the return address caught my eye. A financial institution. Not my bank. Not one Marcus ever mentioned. And the weight of the envelope felt thick. Heavy. A document of some kind. Subtle suspense beat. I held the envelope in my hand, turning it over, my thumb brushing the sealed edge. My heartbeat tapped a little faster. Not panicked, just aware. Marcus had no business getting financial mail at my house. Not if everything was as innocent as he made it sound. The breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead. The cicadas droned on. But the world around me seemed to sharpen in that moment, as if someone had turned up the volume on a truth waiting to be heard. I went back inside, set the envelope on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the kettle warmed on the stove. The whistle came, long and low, but I didn't move to pick it up. The envelope stayed right there between us, silent, heavy, asking a question I wasn't sure I knew how to answer yet. Finally, I reached for it and noticed a faint indent on the front, as if it had been opened before, or as if someone else knew it was coming. long before I did. My name is Harold Bennett, and I've lived long enough to know when somebody is handling me. It's a strange thing, realizing your own child is talking to you the way nurses talk to patients, or how managers talk to employees they plan on replacing. Soft tone, fixed smile, words padded like pillows. All of it meant to keep you from noticing the shove beneath it. That's what Marcus had started doing to me. It happened gradually at first. A phrase here, a tone there, but over time, the shift became unmistakable. He stopped talking with me and started talking around me, talking over me, talking for me, like my thoughts had become optional background noise. It was a Thursday morning when it truly hit me. I was at the kitchen table sorting some utility bills, feeling proud of myself for keeping everything in order. The sunlight was warm, slanting across the wood grain in that soft way that always reminds me of mornings when my wife used to make biscuits. I was humming, something low, something comforting, when Marcus walked in. He didn't knock. He had started letting himself in months ago. "Hey, Dad," he said brightly. Too brightly. "What you working on?" "Just bills," I answered, not looking up yet. "I'm a little behind this week, but I'll catch up." He stepped closer, and when he spoke, there was that tone again. "Dad, don't worry about all that. Let me handle things." I paused mid-fold, staring at the paper in my hands. "Handle what?" "The bills, Dad." He chuckled lightly. "You don't need to be stressing yourself with this anymore. You get confused with numbers." That word slipped out so casually, so quickly, like he was tossing over his shoulder, but it hit me like a brick to the chest. Confused. I put the paper down slowly. "I ain't confused," I said quietly. "I've been paying bills in this house since before you were born." He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was something else. Something I didn't like. "Dad, it's okay. You're getting older. You don't have to pretend." I held his gaze. "Marcus, I'm not pretending anything." He sighed, the long, theatrical kind that people use when they're trying to show patience they don't actually have. "Dad, please, just let me take it from here." "No." He blinked. "What?" "No." I repeated, firmer now. "These are mine." His jaw tightened, just a brief twitch, but it was enough to tell me there was more here than concern. After that conversation, the house didn't feel the same. The air felt thick with something unspoken. I felt watched, assessed, tested, and I kept thinking about that envelope addressed to him, delivered to my house, from a financial institution I'd never used. Later that afternoon, after Marcus left with the bills he claimed I didn't need to worry about, I sat on the back porch staring at the yard I'd tended for decades. The azaleas I'd planted the year Marcus was born were blooming pink along the fence. My wife had loved those flowers. That was my soft, reflective moment. Sitting there, letting the breeze move over me, letting memories soften the sting of the morning. I thought about my wife's voice, gentle, steady, always believing the best in people. And I wondered what she'd say now, what she'd tell me to do. But even in that gentleness, something under my ribs tightened. A worry, a question. If Marcus was so concerned about me, why did it feel like he was rushing, pushing, performing something? After a while, I went back inside, picked up the phone, and called the financial office listed on the envelope. "Thank you for calling Briarwood Financial," the receptionist said. "How can I help you today?" I swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. I received some mail addressed to my son. At my house. I'd like to ask about it." She directed me to someone in account services, a man with a clipped, professional tone. "What's the name on the account?" he asked. "Marcus Bennett." "And your name, sir?" "Harold Bennett. I'm his father." There was typing on the other end, soft, rhythmic taps. "How can I assist?" "Well," I said, clear my throat, "I'm trying to understand why mail for my son comes to my home. His own address is different. Let me check." More typing. Then, "Mr. Bennett, our system shows your address was updated last week as a primary contact. for both Marcus and yourself. I felt my heartbeat shift. Myself. I repeated slowly. Yes, sir. Both profiles list your address as shared residence. That's not correct, I said. Marcus doesn't live here, and I didn't authorize any address change. A longer pause this time. Sir, our system also shows a signature verification for the update. My hand tightened around the phone. A signature? Yes, he said. Yours. My mouth felt dry. I didn't sign anything. He hesitated. Well, the notarized form we received has your signature on it. A coldness spread through my chest. Can I see that document? I asked. Yes, sir. You may visit your nearest branch location to review it. Thank you, I said quietly. I'll come in. My voice felt far away. When I hung up, I just sat there for a long moment, the silence pressing in from all sides. The refrigerator hummed. A crow cawed outside. A truck rumbled down the street. But everything seemed too loud and too quiet at the same time. Someone had used my name, my signature, my identity, and everything inside me knew exactly who it was. Before I could think too much, the front door opened. Dad! Marcus called out. His timing felt wrong. Too convenient. Too close to that phone call. I brought someone with me, he added, sounding strangely cheerful. I stepped into the hallway, my hands braced on the frame. Behind Marcus stood a man in a navy blazer holding a clipboard. They both looked out of place in my home, like salesmen who had already decided what I needed before walking in. This is Greg, Marcus said, smiling too widely. He's from Maplewood Care Center. We're here to talk about moving you in. I stared at my son, slowly, from his neatly pressed collar to the tension in his jaw. I didn't ask for that, I said. Marcus waved a hand dismissively. Dad, come on. Let us handle this. You're overwhelmed. There was again that dismissal, that erasure, that twist of concern, confusion and overwhelm, the words people use to take decisions out of someone's hands. Marcus, I said quietly, step inside. He did. Greg followed, looking uncomfortable now, sensing something wasn't quite as promised. I turned fully to my son, the sunlight catching the lines in both our faces, his younger, sharper, guarded, mine older, tired, but still mine. You went too far, I said softly. His smile faltered. Dad, you tried to move me somewhere without my consent. I added, my voice low but steady. You brought someone into my home without asking me. He swallowed. Dad, you're confused. This is what's best. That word again. Confused. Emotional spike. It hit harder this time. It hit like betrayal wrapped in a gentle tone. I'm not confused, I said, my voice sharper than even I expected. Someone used my signature last week. Someone updated my records. Someone claimed I live with them. His eyes widened, so subtly anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't miss anything anymore. Greg cleared his throat. Maybe we should talk another time. Marcus cut him off, panic flickering in his eyes. No, Dad just needs time. He's not thinking straight. That was the moment I realized something fully. Marcus wasn't trying to help me. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to remove me. I kept my voice even. Gentlemen, this conversation is over. Dad, it's over, I repeated calmly. For a long moment, Marcus held my gaze. I saw a calculation there, then fear, then frustration. He exhaled sharply. Fine, we'll come back later. No, I said. You won't. He stared at me, stunned by the firmness in my tone. Greg stepped back toward the door, relieved. Marcus followed, slow, rigid. The door closed behind them. Silence filled the house. And then, just as I turned toward the kitchen, something caught my eye. Another envelope. Plain. Sitting on my welcome mat. I picked it up. No return address. Inside was a single typed page. Check the signature date. It's not the first. Micro cliffhanger. And that's where the next part begins. I stood there in the quiet hallway for a long moment after Marcus and that representative left, the door still humming faintly from the force with which it had been shut. The house felt different now. Not just heavy, but hollowed out in a way I hadn't felt since the week after my wife died. Back then, the silence carried grief. But this silence carried intention. It felt like someone had scooped out the center of my home and left the walls standing out of habit. I walked slowly into the living room, sat down, and set that anonymous note on the coffee table. Check the signature date. It's not the first. Whoever wrote it didn't sign their name, but the weight of the warning settled on me like a cold coat. Not the first? Meaning someone had been forging my name for longer than I realized. I reached forward with shaky hand, smoothing the paper flat with my palm, and stared at the words again. I didn't want to believe it. Not about my son, not about the boy I'd raised to be honest, decent, hard-working. But denial can't hold up against evidence, not forever. And the look in Marcus's eyes earlier, the edge of panic under all that patience, it stayed with me. For a while I just sat there, breathing slow and deep, grounding myself in little details, the hum of the old fridge, the soft tick of the mantel clock, the way sunlight cut to the blinds and laid stripes across the carpet. These things are mine. These sounds. These shadows. This house. My life. After a while, something inside me hardened. Not anger, not yet. More like resolve. A quiet tightening of the spine. I needed answers. Real ones. Ones I didn't have to pry out of fake concern and soften words. My eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward Marcus's old room. I hadn't stepped into that room in a long time. There was no reason to. After he moved out, I let it sit mostly untouched, figuring he liked it that way. Sentimental. A place that remembered him. But now that I thought about it, he'd been going in there every time he visited. Short visits, long pauses, closing the door behind him to take a call. Little things I didn't pay attention to before. Now they were loud in my memory. I pushed myself up on the couch and made my way down the hall. The carpet was soft under my feet, worn from years of footsteps. Mine, my wife's, Marcus's little feet running up and down. That softness steadied me. When I reached the room, I pushed the door open slowly. It smelled faintly of old cologne and dust. The bed was neatly made. I'd straightened it last month when I thought maybe I should tidy the room up. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, illuminating dust in the air like tiny floating memories. I walked in and stood by the foot of the bed, taking in the familiar space. Trophies from Marcus's high school baseball days. He played second base. Old movie posters he never took down. A bookshelf filled with textbooks he never returned. And on the top shelf, a small wooden box with his initials carved into it. I gave him that box for his 12th birthday. A soft, reflective moment tugged at me, remembering the way his eyes lit up when he opened it. He said it made him feel grown up. He used to keep baseball cards inside. Later, photos of his first car. I kept that memory close, sitting softly in the space between my ribs. But nostalgia had to wait. Something was wrong here. Deeply wrong. I started searching, not in a frantic way, but slow and steady, the way a man who's been disappointed before learns to search. I opened drawers carefully, lifted old notebooks, thumbed through them. Most held nothing but old homework and doodles. But the second drawer down, the one he used to keep locked as a teenager, stuck a little when I pulled it, not jammed, just waited. And when I opened it fully, I saw a manila folder tucked beneath a stack of folded T-shirts. My heart beat once, hard. I reached for it with steady hands, even though inside everything felt far from steady. The folder was thicker than it looked. Heavy, overstuffed. I carried it to the bed, sat on the edge, and laid it across my lap. My fingers paused at the flap. A subtle suspense beat passed through me, like the air in the room shifted, listening. Then I opened it. The first thing I saw was a stack of papers clipped neatly together. The title at the top, Medical Needs Assessment, Harold Bennett. My breath caught. I skimmed the first page and my stomach twisted. It said things like, patient shows signs of cognitive decline and difficulty managing daily responsibilities. None of it true. All of it typed clean and official looking. Someone had filled out sections in tight, controlled penmanship, Marcus's handwriting. I set that aside and picked up the next document, a withdrawal request from my bank. Except the signature at the bottom was mine. Not really. It was too smooth, too controlled. The loop on the H wasn't where I make it. The downward stroke on the Bennett was lifted instead of pressed. It was like someone had practiced my signature, studied it, traced it until they got it nearly perfect. Lord have mercy, I whispered, feeling the room tilt just a little. Behind those documents were more, some typed, some scribbled, some stamped, a few crumpled, fake medical reports. Signatures meant to look like mine, letters requesting power of attorney adjustments, instructions for a property transfer, my property, my home, my accounts, all of it sitting inside a folder in my son's childhood room. The emotional spike hit then, not hot and flashlight, but slow and aching, like a bruise blooming under the skin, a mixture of hurt and disbelief, wrapped in a grief I didn't know how to swallow. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the pain move through me. Memories of Marcus, little, smiling, proud, rose and fell in my mind. Him running into my arms after his first baseball win. Him sitting on the porch eating popsicles with me on summer nights. Him crying into my chest the night his mother died. Where did that boy go? When did he become this man? I didn't have answers. Just the echo of questions that felt too heavy to carry alone. When I opened my eyes again, I saw something at the bottom of the folder, a small yellow sticky note half-tucked under a document. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. On it, written in Marcus's handwriting, rushed, almost excited, were 8 words. Once Dad is moved, the house sells fast. My breath left me in a slow, steady exhale. Not shock, not confusion. Just clarity. Sudden, sharp, cold. This wasn't care. This wasn't protection. This wasn't worry. This was a plan. A plan he'd been working on. A plan with paperwork. A plan with signatures. A plan with timelines. A plan with an ending he'd already decided for me. And I was never meant to be part of the decision. I sat there on the bed holding that note, my hands aging under the weight of betrayal. As the sun lowered on the wall across from me, casting thin shadows that made the room look older, more tired. And slowly, something in me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet resolve. A whisper inside saying, "You will not take my life from me. Not like this. Not quietly. And not without truth." Micro cliffhanger. I folded the note, placed it gently back into the folder, and stood from the bed with a steadiness I didn't feel. Tomorrow, I would find help, and for the first time since all this began, I knew exactly who to call. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the ceiling fan slicing slowly across the plaster as it turned. My house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful now felt watchful, like the walls knew more than I did. Like my own home had been sitting still through a secret I was just now discovering. Every time I closed my eyes, that note resurfaced in my mind. Once Dad is moved, the house sells fast. My son wrote that. My son. I let the hurt wash over me in quiet waves. There was no yelling, no slamming fists, no tears. Just a deep, low ache that settled behind my ribs the way a storm settles over water. Slowly, heavily, but sure. Around 5 in the morning, I finally got up. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky had begun to turn that faint, soft gray blue of early morning, the kind of light my wife used to love. She would sit by the kitchen window with her tea, hands curled around the mug, saying the world felt gentler before everyone woke up. I made coffee, but it didn't taste right. My hands trembled just enough to make me put the cup down before I spilled any. The house creaked softly, old bones shifting with the morning. I glanced toward the hallway, toward Marcus's room, toward the folders sitting on his old bed, like something that didn't belong anywhere else. I took a breath and told myself the truth. I couldn't handle this alone. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. And I knew exactly who I needed to see. Walter. Walter Hughes was the kind of man the world didn't make anymore. Sharp mind, sharper instincts, and a quiet way of seeing through lies like they were made of tissue paper. We worked the same shop floor for decades, welding shoulder to shoulder, sweating through summers that could melt steel through your boots. Later, he moved into internal compliance of the union, paper trails, fraud detection, accountability. He had a mind like a vault and a conscience like bedrock. And more importantly, he had always been honest with me. I grabbed the folder off the bed, slid it into my worn leather briefcase, and headed out before the sun had fully climbed the horizon. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint smell of dew and pine from the yard. My truck coughed once before starting, an old engine with a temper. But it came alive, and I headed toward the edge of town where Walter lived now, tucked away in a modest ranch house with blue shutters his daughter painted for him last fall. I pulled into his driveway around 7. The porch light was still on. Walter stepped out onto the front steps before I even reached the door, as if he'd been expecting me. His hair was whiter than last time I saw him, but everything else about him looked exactly the same. The squared shoulders, the steady eyes, the quiet strength. "Morning, Harold," he said, voice low and even. "Your voice sounded off when you called. Come on in." Inside his living room, the air smelled like coffee and with polish. A small radio played an old Motown station in the background. Walter motioned for me to sit, then eased into his recliner across from me. "All right," he said. "Tell me everything." Slowly. And so I did. I told him about the forged signature, the nursing home representative, the documents I found, the note Marcus wrote. By the time I finished, Walter wasn't leaning back anymore. He was sitting forward, elbows on his knees, brow furrowed the way it used to get whenever he'd uncover a safety violation on the job. "Let me see the papers," he said quietly. I opened the briefcase and handed him the folder. His hands, broad, steady hands that had held welding torches and steering wheels and newborn grandbabies, took the pages one by one, treating them with surgical care. He didn't speak for a long time. He just read. The ticking clock on his wall punctuated the silence with slow, deliberate beats. I watched in the way a man watches a judge read a verdict. My breath felt shallow, my palms damp. Each page he turned felt like another layer of truth peeling back. Finally, he let out a slow exhale and leaned back in his chair. "This is criminal," he said simply. My shoulders sagged with a relief I didn't expect. Relief not because of what he said, but because I finally had someone who wasn't pretending. Someone who wasn't brushing me off, patting my hand, telling me I was confused. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked. He tapped the fake medical report first. "This is fraud. Medical fraud. Someone filled out a professional form without any authorization." Then he lifted the withdrawal request. "This is forgery. Whoever did this studied your signature. Look here." He pointed at the curve in the H that had bothered me. "It's not your hand. It's imitation. And not a clumsy one either. And this," he continued, lifting another sheet, "is attempted elder exploitation. That's serious. People go to prison for this." I swallowed hard, the words sinking in heavy. "He's my son," I said quietly. Walter met my eyes without flinching, "and he tried to take your home, your savings, your autonomy." His voice stayed gentle, but firm. "I'm sorry, Harold, but Marcus crossed a line." I nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle like cold metal in my chest. "Now," he said, drawing a notebook toward him, "let's build a timeline. Walter began writing dates, noting each forged form, matching them to signatures, comparing the notary stamps, tracking the address change. His mind worked like a machine, methodical, sharp, relentless. I sat across from him, watching pieces fall into place, watching lies form a pattern, watching betrayal turn into a structure with walls and floors and intentions. At one point, he looked up. "Harold," he said softly, "he's been planning this for months, maybe longer." I nodded again, quieter this time. My voice didn't trust itself to rise. We spent hours sorting through papers. I answered questions about what Marcus said, what he did, what he touched in the house. Walter drew lines, circled dates, highlighted inconsistencies. And then, sometime after noon, while he was comparing two forms under the lamp, he suddenly froze. His fingers stopped moving. "Harold," he whispered, "come look at this." I stood and leaned over his shoulder. He pointed to a date on the most recent transfer request, one I hadn't examined closely yet. It had been clipped behind a pile of other documents. The request was stamped by the bank, processed, approved pending final identity verification. And at the bottom, a scheduled transfer date, next Wednesday. My stomach dropped. Walter stared at the page, jaw tightening. "Harold, this is your entire savings account. Once this goes through, it moves to a secondary holding account under Marcus's control. Do you see this code?" He tapped a number on the corner. "This isn't just planning. This is already in motion." I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. The room felt smaller, closer, like the walls were leaning in. Next week, 7 days. My own son planned to drain every penny I'd worked 50 years for. Planned to take the home I built with these hands. Planned to uproot my life and tuck me inconveniently away so he could sweep the rest clean. And I almost let him. The emotional spike rose sharp and painful. Betrayal slicing to the last threads of denial. The soft, reflective moment came right behind it. Remembering holding him at 6 years old, his hand so small inside mine, trusted me with every step across a cracked sidewalk. Where did we lose each other? How did he get so far away from the boy I loved? Walter placed a hand on my shoulder, steady, grounding. "We can stop this," he said, "but we have to move. Now." I nodded, breathing slow and deep, letting steadiness find its way back into my bones. "What do we do first?" Walter didn't hesitate. "We contact the bank. We file a fraud alert. We freeze all transfers. Then we document every piece of this. And Harold," he looked me in the eyes, "you cannot confront Marcus." "Not yet." I understood. Quiet justice needed timing, preparation, precision. Marcus needed to show his whole hand before we revealed we'd seen it. I nodded again. Walter stood, gathering documents into neat piles. "We're stopping this before it goes any further. And Harold, you're not alone in this." Those words carried more weight than I expected. For the first time in days, I felt something unclench inside my chest. Not relief exactly, but strength. We worked for another hour in silence, steady, focused, determined. And then Walter's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, looked at the screen, and his eyes widened. "Harold," he said, voice changing, "you need to see this." He turned the phone toward me. On the screen was an email alert from the bank. "Transfer review. Secondary authorization required. Scheduled transfer next week. Initiated by Marcus Bennett." My pulse slowed to a heavy thud. He'd already requested final approval. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. I didn't go home right away. After Walter showed me that transfer notice, I felt something inside me go still. Not angry, not frantic, not even shocked anymore. Just still, like a pond right before a storm hits the surface. You can feel the air tighten, but the water is perfectly calm, holding its breath. Walter watched me carefully, like he was waiting to see whether I'd break, shout, or crumble. But I didn't do any of those things. I just sat there at his kitchen table, hands folded, staring down at the wood grain like it could tell me something I didn't already know. I remember whispering, almost to myself, my own son. Walter didn't say anything at first. He let it settle. He understood. Some betrayals land harder when they come from the people you once carried on your shoulders. After a while, he cleared his throat. Harold, before we take this further, I need to check something. He pulled his laptop closer, opened it, and typed faster than any man with hands that age should be able to. His glasses slid down his nose as he leaned in, scanning through screens I couldn't see from where I sat. He muttered himself now and then, small sound of surprise or recognition, the sort of noises people make when a puzzle starts revealing its picture. I sat back, letting my mind drift. My wife's voice floated into quiet, a memory of her saying, "People show who they are when they're scared, not when they're safe." I never understood that as clearly as I did now. I could feel another emotional spike building, not hot or explosive, but deep, like something under the surface of my ribs was cracking open. Hurt does that. It doesn't always come in flames. Sometimes it comes like a slow leak, emptying you out before you even realize it. "Harold," Walter finally said, pulling me back. I looked up. His face wasn't shocked. It was disappointed, like someone who'd been hoping the truth might be kinder. "You aren't going to like this," he said. I swallowed. "Just tell me." He turned the laptop so I could see the screen. Rows of numbers, statements, balance sheets, overdue notices, red warning markers, a spreadsheet from a gambling site, a private lender's letterhead. Some accounts overdue by a month, some by 6. One marked final warning. It didn't take a genius to read what it meant. My son was drowning, deeply, quietly, desperately, and I'd never known. Walter tapped one entry in particular, something labeled Horizon Group Collections. "That one's trouble," he said. "Private money, high interest, wrong crowd. They don't chase debts with phone calls. They chase them with pressure." I felt something inside me fold inward. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even betrayal anymore. It was something far quieter and far heavier. Heartbreak, pure and simple. Not because of the money, not because he'd tried to take my house, but because he'd rather sacrifice me than come to me. He'd rather forge my name than speak his truth. He'd rather put me in a home than admit he needed help. "I raise a man who can't stand on his own feet," I murmured. "I raise a man who cut down his father instead of asking for a hand." Walter didn't interrupt. He let the words come out the way wounds drain, slow, necessary, painful. He was so bold about it. I said quietly, so sure I wouldn't notice, so sure I wouldn't fight back, like I'm already gone. Walter leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "Harold, people don't get this desperate overnight. Your son, he's been in trouble a long time, long enough to think stealing from his father is the only way out." That thought sat heavy on my chest. "Maybe," I whispered, "but that doesn't make it right." "No," Walter agreed, "but it tells you what kind of man you're facing." I nodded slowly. It did. Marcus wasn't a mastermind. He wasn't some calculating criminal. He was a drowning man grabbing whatever he could to stay afloat, even if it meant pulling his own father under. "Here's the worst part," Walter continued, clicking to a bank screen showing a timeline. "Marcus already initiated your savings transfer. It's pending, but he also set up something else." He clicked again. A second request appeared, signed with my name. "Power of attorney," Walter said. I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. He hadn't just wanted my house. He hadn't just wanted the money. He wanted control, total control, over my accounts, my medical decisions, my home, my life, and he'd planned it like a man writing a script for a future that didn't include me. A soft, reflective memory rose in me. The day I taught Marcus to ride his bike. He was scared, knees shaky, hands gripping the handlebars so tight his knuckles went white. I told him, "I won't let you fall, son. Not on my watch." I kept that promise then. He didn't keep his. I looked up at Walter, feeling something more stable return to my lungs. "So what now? Police? Fraud report." Walter closed the laptop gently. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if you go in swinging now, he'll claim confusion. He'll claim you misunderstood. He'll backpedal, hide evidence, clean up his tracks. He'll cry if he needs to, play the good son. And trust me, systems eat that stuff up. A son crying about an aging dad named Harold Bennett? They'll believe him over you." I knew he was right. I'd seen it before. The world assumes the older one is confused. That age strips truth from your tongue. Walter leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You want justice, Harold? Real justice? Quiet justice?" I nodded slowly. "Then you don't confront him at all," he said. "You let him walk himself right into the trap his own hands built." I breathed out. "How?" Walter lifted a small notebook. Flipping to a fresh page, we set a timeline of our own. We gather every document, every signature, every forged date. We freeze your accounts without telling him. We let him try the transfer. When it bounces, he'll make a move out of panic. He'll reveal more. He'll call someone, visit someone, file something new. And that helps us how? I asked quietly, because men who think they're clever always get sloppy right before they fall. His words settled over me, steady as a hand on my shoulder. "And when he slips," Walter continued, "we'll already have a file built, with timestamps, official records, your statements, my analysis, everything the authorities need. We won't accuse him." He paused. "We'll just show the truth." A subtle suspense beat tightened the air between us. "And Harold," he added quietly, "you won't have to raise your voice. Not once. The evidence will do all the talking." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that wash through me. The idea of shouting, of arguing, of confronting Marcus, that felt wrong. Too loud, too messy, too much like fighting fire with fire. But truth? Truth doesn't need volume. Truth needs clarity. Truth needs timing. And Walter was offering me exactly that. When I opened my eyes, the room felt steadier. "Tell me what you need from me," I said. Walter nodded once, slow and certain. "I need you to be patient, and strong, and quiet. That's all." I could do that. I'd been strong my whole life. And silence? Silence was something I understood deeply. Walter walked to a drawer, and pulled out an old Union binder, thick, worn, and filled with notes, forms, templates. He set it on the table between us. "In here," he said, "is how we build a case without ever lifting our voice." I stared at the binder, symbolic object, the weight of old justice sitting in front of me. It looked like the kind of thing men relied on before lawyers slicked everything in paperwork and excuses. It looked honest. Walter flipped to a blank page. "Let's begin." And just when we started outlining next steps, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. His eyebrows lifted. "Harold," he said slowly, turning the screen toward me, "you need to see this." On the phone was a message from one of Walter's old contacts at the bank. "Update. Marcus Bennett inquired this morning about expediting the transfer." My breath left my body like someone had taken the air out of the room. He was accelerating the plan. He was desperate. He was close. Walter closed his notebook and looked straight at me. "It's time," he said. "Time for what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Walter's expression sharpened. "For your quiet revenge." I woke up the morning Marcus planned to move me into care with a strange feeling in my chest. Not fear, not anger, something steadier. Something like the heaviness right before rain. The house was quiet, the same way it always was at sunrise, but this time the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like it was waiting, like the walls of this home, the one I'd worked for my whole life, knew today would finally set things right again. I made coffee the slow way, letting the kettle sing its small, thin whistle. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd sat for nearly 40 years, right in the chair where my wife used to tap my hand when she wanted to show me something on a grocery list. The soft morning light slid across the floorboards, warming the edges of the room, and for a moment, I just let myself breathe, really breathe. Walter's words echoed in my mind. You won't need to raise your voice. Just be present. Let the truth speak. The folder sat on the table, closed neatly, all the documents arranged in order. Fake signatures, forged medical reports, bank notices, the timeline Walter built with his careful hand. But beside it sat something else, a card from the State Elder Investigations Office. Walter had contacted them 3 days earlier. They took one look at the evidence and agreed to send someone today. I didn't tell Marcus. There was no need. Quiet revenge works best when the person trapping themselves doesn't even realize the cage door has already swung shut. I was sipping my coffee when I heard the first car pull into the driveway, the sound of tires crunching over gravel. My hand didn't shake when I set the mug down. I stood, smoothed my shirt, and walked to the living room. Marcus's voice reached me before he stepped inside. Dad, hey, we're gonna make this easy, okay? Greg's here again, and we can load your essentials from the bedroom. His voice carried that strange, fake cheeriness again, like he was hosting a birthday party nobody wanted to attend. I heard footsteps, 2 sets. Marcus walked in first, clipboard under his arm, jaw set with that impatient determination he wore whenever he thought he was fixing something. Behind him was Greg, the nursing home representative, looking even more uncomfortable than last time. His eyes flicked around the room like he was afraid of being caught somewhere he shouldn't be. But what Marcus didn't notice, what he didn't even think to look for, was a third person already seated silently in my living room chair. A woman in a plain navy suit. Calm, neutral, observant. She introduced herself earlier as Miss Carter, but now she simply sat with her bag against her knee, pen poised, ready. Marcus didn't see her. Not yet. He was too busy rehearsing his lines. Dad, if we leave now, we can check you in before lunch. They've even got that activity room you like. Remember how you said, Marcus, I said quietly. He stopped mid-sentence, startled by my tone. I didn't sound confused, or overwhelmed, or anything he expected. He straightened. Dad, we don't need to do this. I know it's emotional, but I'm not emotional. I said calmly. I'm listening. Something you haven't done with me in a long time. His face twitched, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But before he could recover, Greg cleared his throat. Marcus, who was that? Marcus turned. His eyes landed on Miss Carter. She didn't rush. She didn't announce anything dramatic. She simply closed her pen and stood. Good morning, she said, voice even. I'm with the state's Elder Affairs Investigation Unit. I have some questions for both of you. The color drained from Marcus's face so fast I almost heard it leave him. What? He stammered. Why? Dad is confused. No, I said, stepping closer, calm as ever. I'm not confused. Ms. Carter nodded to me gently, then opened her binder. We received evidence of potential forged medical reports, falsified bank signatures, attempted unauthorized transfers, and misuse of power of attorney documents. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a man trying to swallow water he didn't know was boiling. What evidence? He asked weakly. I walked to the table, picked up the folder, and placed it in Ms. Carter's hands. She opened it slowly. Everything was there. His handwriting, his copies, his plans, his notes, his timeline, all of it. Marcus took one small step backward, then another. Dad, you don't understand. I was just trying to. Don't. I said softly. Don't lie to me in my own house. He froze. Greg took a respectful step to the side, sweat beading along his temple. He finally understood why this visit felt wrong. Ms. Carter began reading aloud, not loudly, not accusingly, just firmly. Once Dad is moved, the house sells fast, she read. Marcus shut his eyes. His breath came fast and shallow. His hands shook at his sides. That was the moment the truth finally hit him. There would be no shouting match, no dramatic confrontation, no father-son brawl in the living room, just paperwork and consequences. Greg spoke quietly. Marcus, did you tell me he approved these documents? Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. Silence settled over the room. Thick, unquestionable, undeniable. Ms. Carter moved through each page like a surgeon. Precise, professional, unshaken. She asked Marcus questions he couldn't answer. Asked about signatures he couldn't defend. Asked about dates he forgot he forged. Every answer he offered cracked apart before it even left his mouth. He finally crumpled into the dining chair, head in his hands. I was going to lose everything, he whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I looked at him for a long moment, and the strange thing was, I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Just an old, deep sadness, the kind that comes from loving someone who forgot the weight of your sacrifices. The kind that comes when you realize the child you carried on your shoulders is now a grown man who would have sold those shoulders if he thought no one would notice. Ms. Carter closed her binder gently. Mr. Bennett, she said, all transfers of your assets have been frozen. Your accounts are secure. Your home is secure. There will be follow-up steps, but you are protected. I nodded. Marcus looked up at me, eyes red. Dad, please. I raised a hand. I'm not punishing you, I said softly. That's not what this is. The law is handling the part that belongs to the law. But the part that belongs to us, that's something I can't fix today. He swallowed hard, tears slipping down his face. But Dad, Son, I said, you try to erase me. He broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, shoulders shaking like a man finally realizing the cost of his choices. Ms. Carter gathered her things and stepped outside to give us space. Greg mumbled an apology and followed her. Marcus stayed seated, hands covering his face. I stood in the quiet of my living room, the place I built with my own hands, and for the first time in months, I felt the house breathe again, felt it loosen its shoulders, felt it come back to me. No rage, no chaos, just truth, and truth is enough. Later that evening, after the cars were gone and the sun began to dip behind the pine trees in my yard, I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of tea. The boards creaked under my weight the same way they always had, but the sound felt welcoming again. I sat in my old rocking chair, the one my wife bought at a yard sale 30 years ago. The air carried the smell of cut grass and warm dirt. The wind moved just enough to rustle the leaves. I felt peace return, not all at once, but slowly, gently, like someone folding a blanket over my shoulders. My life, my home, my dignity, they were still mine. The law, not fury, not shouting, not revenge, had delivered justice. Quiet, firm, simple. I heard a car start down the street and wondered where Marcus would go now, what choices he'd make next. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. But I knew one thing for certain. A man has to face the future he tried to steal. And he would. As for me, I was still here, whole, standing, breathing, living. I rocked slowly in the quiet evening light, listening to the world settle around me, grateful for the strength it took not to scream, but to stay still. Quiet justice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to be true. And mine was. If this story touched you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop a single word in the comments. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.